It's a good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy, Millsy. Back with Hometown Commander, back for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I brew my version 1.0 decklist of the Commander in front of us in my quest to brew the Magic world. You know the motto, baby, is ABB, always be brewing, and that's what we're back to do today. The deck list is going to be down in the description for you below. As well as I'd really appreciate it if you could interact with the video, like, comment, subscribe, do all that YouTube stuff. I'd appreciate it. But today, I always like to, when we talk about sets or we go back to planes, I always like to go back and cover old commanders because it's fun. You never know what support you're going to get. But remember that with March of the Machine and March of the Machine, the Aftermath, there were a lot of commanders that got represented in those sets from different planes. And we did see some of Avishkar's representation in that, in a couple different cards. But the card I want to talk about that I actually have not covered for the channel is Pia Nalaar, Consul of Revival. This is a 2-mana, 2/3 Human Artificer that says Thopters we control have haste. Whenever we play a land from exile or cast a spell from exile, we get to make a 1/1 Thopter. I've seen this card used a lot in decks like the Naya Rocco from this set that cares about, playing things from exile and things like that. But the thing I like about Pia is it kind of falls into this role of a Boros deck that makes tokens that can support the tokens really well, but it has some other thing that it cares about. And there's a lot of ways in these colors to get things into exile to play. There's so many of these effects, and we're going to take advantage of them. We can also take advantage of all of our Thopters being tokens, being artifacts, buff them. That's the goal. Make a board of Thopters, get in, and do some damage to our opponents. But all right, how are we going to play things from exile? Well, there's a lot of ways to approach this. We have things like Chandra that lets you exile the top card of your library each turn, and if you don't cast it, it deals 2 damage each opponent, but it at least lets you get a card into exile you can cast. Quintorius is actually kind of plays double. It can discover 4, and it's -3, but it also says whenever you cast a spell from exile, it gets to deal damage to each opponent, and you gain 2 life, which is nice, right? Being able to kind of get some incremental things. The Quintorius can also just make some tokens if you need it, but I like Quintorius because it kind of allows you to pay off those exiles. Bonehorde Dracosaur exiles 2 cards each turn. We can play them. If we exile a land, we get to make a 3/1 dinosaur. If we exile a non-land card, we get to make a treasure. And then, hey, it's a relevant threat. It exiles 2 each turn. We can play lands from it exiles, and of course that will trigger P as well. And it's just a nice way to get that exile turn over turn. Grenzo is a really fun option because it kind of gets to do 2 different things. Whenever a creature we control deals damage to a player in combat, we get to choose one. We can either go to a creature that player controls, or we can exile the top card of our library, and until end of turn, we can cast that card. This is a really interesting set of abilities because you have to remember that most of our Thopters are going to be, or most of our creatures are going to be Thopters that are in the air. And unless we have opponents that have a ton of flyers or relevant a number of flyers to block, we might be able to make sure that Grenzo ability gets through. I mean, there's 2 worlds of possibilities. You go to the opponent you're the most worried about, right? Making sure they have to attack somebody else, or you go right to combat, right? Attack with your Thopters, see what you exile, and then potentially just print more Thopters to block or do other things. I really like Grenzo. I think it works really well with what we're trying to do. Lele, of course, is probably one of the most well-known creatures in this archetype. And whenever it attacks, you exile the top card of your library. You can play that card this turn. And whenever one or more cards are put into exile from your library or graveyard, you put a counter on Lelia. So as she grows, as you exile things, you can play things. I mean, Lelia is just great. One of the newer cards that I really like in this strategy is Party Thrasher from Modern Horizons 3. It gives all your non-creature spells you cast from exile Convoke. This is nice because remember the Thopters can tap for Convoke, which is actually very helpful. But beginning our pre-combat main phase, we can discard a card if we do exile the top 2, and we can play those cards. So again, just another way to get things into exile, get them going, get them playing. Plargan Nasarius at the beginning of our upkeep. Each player exiles from the top until they hit a non-land card. An opponent chooses a non-land card exiled this way, you can cast up to 2 spells from among the other ones without paying their mana cost. This is a very intriguing ability, but the truth is, it can get us a lot of value from our opponent's decks and ours. Yeah, we might pay a little bit for it, and maybe we'll have to exile a land or 2 sometimes. But I think just because your opponent picks one that we can't cast doesn't mean we're not going to find a ton of value in the other 2. And remember, this guarantees at least 2 casts for the purposes of all these other abilities. Embrace the Unknown, exile the top 2 until the end of your next turn. We can play those. That's what we care about, right? The most is the ones where we have multiple turns to play it, and we can actually retrace it back. Ensnared by the Mara, has each opponent choose a choice. They can exile from the top until they hit a non-land card, and we get to play it for free. Or they exile the top 4 cards, and it deals damage equal to the total mana value of those cards. So just a very interesting ability. Obviously, we're hoping they pick the first one. We won't turn down the damage, if need be. Ignite the Future lets us exile the top 3, and we can, until the end of our next turn, we can play them. But if we flash back from our graveyard, we get to pay them without paying their mana cost, which is interesting. Light Up the Stage is probably the kind of card you're going to see the most of in our deck. Exile the top 2 until the next turn, you can play them. We've got 4 or 5 spells that each do that for 2 or 1 mana. So, lots of options there. And then Season the Bold, one of the Bloomborough Season spells, works great for us because the middle ability lets us exile the top 2 until the end of your next turn, you can play them. So we can do that twice because we get to pick 5 paws worth of modes. So we could make a tap treasure and exile the top 4, right, and be able to play them. That seems like pretty good for 5 mana. Or we do have the option to start pinging out some damage, but I really like the ability to kind of mix and match the first 2 abilities, exile some things, maybe make some treasures for next turn. There's a lot of ways to look at Season of the Bold, but I think it has some value for us. Surge to Victory is a card I've used a lot in some other decks, but I feel like it looks pretty cool here. So you exile an instant or sorcery from your graveyard, and then creatures we control get +X/+O, where X is that spell's mana value. And then whenever a creature we control hits a player this turn in combat, we copy the exiled spell. We cast the copy without paying its mana cost. So this is important because we're casting the copy from exile. So we're going to get that there. But mainly, this is just going to buff all of our Thopters. And at minimum, get us a ton of value. And okay, I'm pretty sure we're casting that copy from exile. But even if we're not, think about it. You could copy something like Throes of Chaos that's sitting beside it and get a bunch of copies of them. It just has Cascade, so it's going to immediately, right, cascade into something else. Or, you could just get something really good depending on what you have access to in the moment. Surge of Victory is a great way to not only buff our board, but get value from something. Throes of Chaos just cascades, and then it retraces, so we can retrace it back. But again, Cascade's not bad considering a lot of our things are under that threshold. Sword of Fortune Frontier says whenever the equipped creature deals damage to a player, we exile the top 2 cards of our library, and we can play those cards this turn, and we can play an additional land this turn. A great way to get things into exile and play lands from exile as well. Uba Mask says that if a player would draw a card, they actually exile it face up from the game instead. And then whenever players can play cards they have exiled with Uba Mask. I love this because it basically just makes sure that all of our draws are going into exile and making sure that they're going to force us to play it from exile where we want it anyway. This is going to hurt some players' game plans because they really want cards in their hand, and I don't mind doing that at all, right? If it helps us and it hurts our opponents, that's great, and what we want. Count on Luck can give us an exile each turn. Again, great. It's exactly what we want. Same thing with Outpost Siege. This is exactly what we want. We want cards that are going to get things into exile so we can play them each turn. But I think the other thing to remember about our deck is we're making Thopters. And there's a lot of ways we can pay that off, either by making more tokens, having our tokens be better. An Impicall is just another token outlet. A lot of the things that buff our creatures are either based on them being tokens or artifacts, and an Impicall does make artifact tokens, so I think she's a great kind of add-on piece here for us. But something like Illustrious Wanderglyph makes gnomes on everybody's turn, but then once we have the City's Blessing, all of our artifacts get +2, or creatures get +2/+2. Oh, well, all those Thopters are our artifacts, right? So that matters. Neali kind of is the best of both worlds for us. Our attacking tokens get double strike, and then whenever one of our tokens attack a player, we exile the top card of our library, and during any turn where we attacked with a token, we can play those cards. This is really nice, because each turn we should potentially be able to exile up to 3 and just start playing them. Right, and then on a future turn, we could just run a Thopter into somebody if we have to play something back out of exile. Stridehanger Automaton is perfect, and this is one of the things that made me want to build this deck, or for the channel, is Thopters get a buff, and then anytime we'd make a token, we get an extra Thopter. So basically just 2 Thopters every time. Great, love it. Caretaker's Talent, right from Bloomborough, great draw outlet. Once a turn, we get to draw whenever we make a token. Level 2 can copy a token, again, to get a draw on a turn where maybe we won't be able to have it. And then level 3 buffs all of our creatures. And then Dollmaker's Shop and Gallery just feels perfect here. On the shop side, we're going to get a couple toy tokens every turn as we're attacking. Again, not irrelevant because they are artifact creatures, so that is helpful for the purpose of other abilities. What we really care about is Porcelain Gallery. 6 mana turning all of our creatures into XXs, where X is the number of creatures we control, is huge when you're making a number of 1/1 flying Thopters, right? So now they're in the air and they're going to get huge and be real threats to our opponents. So some of those, right, did buff the team, but really they were just trying to make more tokens go wider. Here's where we're going to truly focus on buffing the team. Jor Kadeen says as long as we have 3 or more artifacts, all of our creatures get +3/+0. Again, great, right? Now those Thopters are becoming even bigger in the air. Sarah Line says as long as an artifact entered the battlefield under your control this turn, creatures we control get +2/+2. Love it. Great, because we should be getting a artifact in every turn, right? For the purposes of Pia. But then it takes it a step further. If she and 2 other creatures attack, she deals damage equal to the number of artifacts you control to target player. That's a huge upside, because then we can, potentially start doming somebody for more damage before we get into combat. Patchwork Banner, we're pretty much always going to choose Thopter, so all of our Thopters get that +1/+1 buff, and get to tap for mana. Intangible Virtue, right, just buffing all of our tokens, getting the Vigilance. Cathar's Crusade is where our deck should be able to start getting slightly out of hand, right? Putting counters on them when things come in, just really growing our board, making our Thopters a threat. And then another card that maybe, again, really want to brew this was Renewed Solidarity. So we're going to choose Thopters. Thopters are going to get +1/+0. In the beginning of our end step, for each Thopter we made this turn, each token, we get to make another one. That's huge, because then we're just getting more and more Thopters, right, becoming more and more of a threat to our opponents over the course of the game. Shared Animosity. Every creature's getting +1/+0 for each other creature that shares a type with it attacking. Again, since those Thopters are in the air, that can make them real threats to our opponents. And what I like specifically about Shared Animosity, and something to remember, is that there's always going to be people can just chump block our Thopters. Sure. But if you're playing against another flying deck, let's say you're playing into a Dragon's deck or an Angel's deck, when your Thopters start becoming 5/1, 6/1, 7/1s when they're attacking, the profitable, hey, I'm just going to chump block your Thopter and get rid of it, becomes a lot less relevant for those players. And they have to start making a lot better decisions of, do I take that damage or do I trade into it? And that's what we want, right, as someone who has a bunch of these Thopters hopefully laying around. Tempered Steel just bluffing all of our artifact creatures. And then Virtual Loyalty gets to give them pseudo-vigilance, in the sense that we get to untap all of our creatures at the end of turn, but we get to put a counter on each of them as well. I love it. I think it's a great way to get attacking and then buff your creatures and untap them. It's also really relevant if we have any creatures that tap to do anything. We don't, that I can remember in the deck, but if we wanted to play something like Steel Overseer, we could do that, and it pairs really well with that. But I've said it before on the show, and I'll say it again. No deck's ever complete. This is our version 1.0 shot at Pia. And in testing, I think what I'd want to see is, I think I have enough ways to cast things from exile. The truth is, do we need more of the profiting from exile? So I looked into something like Araxa from the Doctor Who decks that makes you a token anytime you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand. We have the Urabrask from Streets of New Capenna that says, beginning of your upkeep, we exile the top card of our library. We can play it this turn. And at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, the next turn they would draw a card this turn. Instead, exile the top card of their deck, and they may play it. It's kind of the Ubamask ability, but it's on a creature. Except it's not, right? Because Ubamask lets them play it anytime. This just says you play it this turn or it's gone, right? I love the idea of this effect. I just honestly couldn't find a slot for it. I was trying to focus more on making sure we were well-rounded, trying to make sure we take advantage of all of the things we're doing and not just playing from exile. Because the truth is, I think if we can pay off making those Thopters and those tokens bigger, I think it's going to lead to more of an advantage for us than sticking a few random cards into exile. But I could see why Urabrask could be really valued. And then just an example of into the Time Vortex, just being another way to get stuff from exile that's a little more expensive. I think I'm more willing to fly into the Rob the Archive style of cards where you exile the top 2 for like 2 mana than I am with Into the Time Vortex style of cards. But it is really good to remember that you're casting that thing for free off the Cascade. And so there's definitely a lot of ways that those Cascade cards can be really good. I was just trying to find my balance, and maybe Vortex comes in as a great way. If we realize that a lot of our things are mana 4 or lower that we really want, then maybe Vortex is a great choice, right, to come in and kind of give that to us. But let's get into our playtests, which we love to do here on the channel. Remember, the goal of the playtest is not to find Magical Christmas Lamb. It's not to determine our best plays. It's to start getting into some game situations, understanding how we build our board state so that we can be better when it comes to game time. Here we're keeping a 4-lander with Patchwork Banner, Banner of Kinship, another great way to buff all of our Thopters. And then the Showdown of the Scalds, a card I've always liked, feels great here. So we exile the top 4. Until the end of your next turn, We could play those cards. And then on turns 2 and 3, whenever we cast a spell, we get to put a counter on a creature we control. So gets us some cards, right? Gets them into exile. Here we'll play the Verge. We drew Dollmaker's Shop. Great, mainly for that gallery. I think we're going to be able to get there mana-wise. Turn 2, play Pia, right? This is going to work great into our, I'm thinking just into our Patchwork banner next turn. Right, so we can start buffing those Thopters. We're a little bit far off exiling, but my thought here is now next turn I could get into Showdown of the Skalds, or something else potentially. Gobekon may look odd to some people. It's a battle. On the front side, you get to take a card from somebody's hand and it costs more. What we really like is on the back side, it gives a counter to every creature that attacked this turn, and you basically can sack it to give Heroic Intervention to your board. I love this card, and since we're going to have creatures flying, we should ideally be able to get in for some big damage. So, yeah, banner on turn 3. Ooh, turn 4 we see Chandra, so that's nice as well. That could be good, but I kind of like the Skalds. So we're going to go ahead and exile the top 4. We see the Flux, a Mountain, Flawless Maneuver, and a Mountain. So we can play cards from there, meaning we can play the lands until the end of our next turn. So we'll probably only be able to get 1 land from here, but I'm thinking probably the Flux plus a Mountain, it's going to get us a couple Thopters. Nothing else I can do for 1 mana, so that's A-okay. So we'll play a Mountain this turn from exile and get that Thopter. Remember that it's only when we cast a spell that we get to put a counter on one of our things. So the only spell I think is going to be really helpful... Oh, we actually can cast Flawless Maneuver for free this turn. Actually, we probably will still use it then this turn. We have no reason not to, right? Just get another Thopter. So when it comes in, it does 4 damage to a creature an opponent controls. On turns 2, 3, 4, and 5, we get to just exile the top card, play it, and then on turn 6, we add 6 mana. So I'm going to play this, put the counter on Pia, get a Thopter. So far I've just spent 4 mana. I've got 2 mana left. I think I'd probably get something like the Gobekon in, because we can probably actually might be able to get it to flip over this turn. And then play the Flawless Maneuver for free. We have no reason not to. It's stuck in exile no matter what, right? Put the counter on Pia. And then I would probably try to pick a player who I think I could attack this Gobekon into pretty quickly. If it's not this turn, because remember I created all these this turn, maybe next turn. Otherwise, if I can, I'll try to run Pia into that Gobekon. I don't think that it flips over this turn. I think somebody probably has something waiting to get to block it. But I think it's still important that you pick the player that these Thopters can attack into to get that going. Just so we can track where these are at. So as we come into our next turn, this goes into the 3rd. So whenever we cast a spell this turn, put a counter, and I can still play this Mountain from exile, getting me another Thopter. And then the Flux says we exile a card, we can play it this turn. Caretaker's Ground's great. I guess I could have played it before the Mountain, right? I think that would make more sense, right? Play it, get the Thopter, play the Mountain, get the Thopter, draw a card, right? So now we're in good shape. We've got 4 mana left. I like the idea of Chandra, but I love the idea of trying to get towards that gallery. We're almost there, and I feel like it's going to be great once we get there. I think I'll just hold up the Boros Charm, and I guess we'll put a counter on Pia for that Caretaker. I'd rather hold up the Boros Charm just to protect the board and just go attacking. Right, these Thopters are 2/2s right now. Oh my gosh, the Thopters have haste because of Pia, which means I probably could have flipped the Gobekon over last turn. Let's say we did. Let's say we put it at the right person and we flipped over last turn. She would be a thing up. All these would be a counter. These would be a counter up for attacking. Then we actually would have gained 1 more because we cast the backside. Right, it says to exile it, then cast it, transforms. We actually do get the backside when we get the backside. But now, I totally forgot they had haste. That's on me. Now we take the attacks with the Thopters in the air, right? They're getting buffed because of the Patchwork banner. I mean, we're still in great shape. We can hold this and the Boros Charm up for protection. I think that's just great. And now work our way into our next turn. Get another card with the Flux, Renewed Solidarity. Again, great. Play it from there. Get a Thopter. So now we're going to start hopefully netting some Thopters. We have Dawn's Truce for protection. Great. We're just like 1 mana off of playing that banner, which would be really great. At this point, I'd have to pitch a card, and I don't think I even care. I think I have so much protection up that I don't even think I mind it, to be honest, right? Because the Thopters can attack. I'm packing a ton of protection. Like, I can just pitch something like, well, Chandra adds mana, but I think the truth is at this point, we've got plenty. Now it's just going to be maneuvering ourselves into the late game. So next turn, it's probably just the gallery. And then our opponents are in huge trouble because we probably get at least one more Thopter this turn from the one we created. And now our opponents are just in trouble once we, get this board into combat, and we have 1, 2, 3 ways to protect it. But let's get into playtest number 2. That one, all right, nice, well oiled. Let's go to another one here. Keeping a 4-laner with Uba Mask, the formation for the counters and the indestructible, and then Organic Extinction, destroying all non-artifact creatures. The hidden lands I threw in here just because it does allow you to discover, which is a way to get a card from exile. It's kind of expensive at 5 mana to do it, but I think, right, there could be times where it makes sense to do it. On turn 2, I don't want to get... If I get Pia down, I can't get Uba Mask down next turn. But if I play the Signet, I could get Uba Mask down. I gotta play the Signet, because then this turn, if I Uba Mask and it's anything more than 2 mana, it's going to be awkward, right? Because then it's just going to get stuck in exile. So I think the answer was Pia last turn, Boros Signet this turn. Again, it feels awkward, but the truth is it's just all we can do. Now for 5, we could do Neali. I think it's just Uba Mask. Start kind of doing that. Now we see an Plains for turn, we play it, get the Thopter. Now we're at 6 mana. I'd probably go for the Mara. I mean, at best, it's getting me 3 Thopters, right? And just have, hopefully, we'll say it's at least 2. Take the attacks this turn. That goes into exile. Remember, we play from exile, get the Thopter. Really love a way to buff all my creatures here. All I have right now is the... So let's play the Season of the Bold. I'm going to exile the top 4 until my end of my next turn. I can play them, and then I'll make a tap treasure. Love the Smithy. Love seeing the Throes of Chaos. The Divide's great as another land, so lots of options to play next turn. But I've still got 2 mana left. Is there anything in here for 2 mana? I could Faithless Looting, I guess, if I want to, but I really like my hand, so we'll just take some attacks this turn. Uba Mask gets me a Path of Ancestry. We'll make the make the Thopter there. Play the Smithy, make a Thopter. It'll make us a Gnome as well. That's 4 mana. Then play the Throws, because we have the tapped treasure, so that should be 8, right? We should have 8 total this turn. Play the Throws, go ahead and Cascade off of 4, so that's going to be cascading for 3. Solidarity's perfect. So getting another Thopter. And then so that's 2 Thopters this turn on end step. Take the attacks with the Thopters this turn. Next turn, we're going to be able to pretty easily flip that Thousand Moon Smithy over, and I think we're just in a great spot. Put Neali down. I'm thinking next turn, probably just Neali plus Unbreakable formation. Just take a big attack. They have double strike, right? And I think we're in good shape there for that playtest. But let's get into playtest number 3. Keeping a 3-lander with the Talisman. We got the Stride Hanger there for that. We got the Wanderglyph, and we have War Leader's Call. Good way to start damaging our opponents when our creatures come in. We've got a good amount of stuff here. Here's another one of those. Do we play Pia or the the Talisman? I think I'll play Pia. I guess we'll go with the Talisman. We're kind of a turn behind. This is kind of the awkward thing, right, about playing, having that, not being able to, having a 2-mana commander. I guess the argument could have been made that we do this last turn, and then this turn, do this plus the Virtue, maybe. Could be the argument, right? Just to still use our mana but get things in. And then this turn, man, I think it's just Chandra. Don't want to do it just yet, because if I exile anything but a land, right, I can't play it. So we'll just, tick up to add 2 red. And then now this turn, we could go ahead and tick up Chandra. It's a Dispatch. which we could technically play. I just don't know if we want to, right? 4 mana. We do have enough for the Scalds. We do have enough for the Stridehanger. We do have enough for War Leader's Call. I think it's the Scalds just to load some more things in exile. We've got Umask, Garrison, Signet, and Sundown Pass. I haven't played a land this turn. I think we play a Sundown Pass, get a Thopter. So this one's gone, but now we have a Signet, a land, and Ubamask for this next turn. Play the Garrison. We'll tap the mountain before we pick it up. So we've got 2, 3, 4, 5 mana. Play the Ubamask, get a Thopter, put a counter on Pia. Tick up her, play the Boros Signet, get another. Now we're in good shape. We're just trying to get our mana up. We've got lots to do in hand. The Wanderglyph and the Stridehanger are now going to be perfect to help us keep our board state going. So in this next turn, where we exile instead of drawing, Flawless Maneuver is great as a way to just protect our board. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 mana. Automaton plus Wanderglyph. Wanderglyph comes in and makes that gnome, buffs up all of our Thopters. I guess tick up for the mana. That way we can hold up mana for Boros Charm just in case. It's just whenever we cast a spell, right? So we could go more on Pia there. Attack, play the Flawless Maneuver just to get another Thopter and a counter. And then I think we're in a great spot here. Unless someone wipes the board, we've got the Thopters going, we've got the buffs going, we're getting a ton of gnomes. I think now it's just playing War Leader's Call and then trying to keep our board protected with like Boros Charm and just continue to get stuff on board that way. But let me know, what do you think of Pia Nalaar? Again, probably lower bracket 3 would be my guess. It's not going to be a top end deck where you're threatening the top end of bracket 3, but I think it's a really interesting deck. I kind of like these Boros, token style decks. I loved that Inimicall list I did, and I've still thought about bringing it back. But let me know what you think of Pia, and we'll catch you all in the next one.